Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon for most of us. It is 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I am David Mullings, and I appreciate all your time. I will give people time to come in as always. I never take for granted the fact that you guys take an hour out of your day on the weeks when I do this. This is season 2 of Island Forward Live. We've been going over a number of topics. Today I'm supposed to have a guest. He is running into some issues, so we might not actually have him on today. We'll have to bring him back. His name is James Elmore, and he recently had hosted a virtual island summit. Almost 10,000 people attended that. A really interesting information over a number of days. And so I'm hoping James will be able to join us, but I hope that we ourselves will be able to have a discussion. I see it saying here that we're having some trouble with LinkedIn on the stream. So if you're not seeing me on LinkedIn, apologies. You'll have to watch the YouTube version. But special thanks to Jamaicans.com, who continues to be a media partner for what we're doing. Excited for where these things go. But let me. So that's there. I see Marlene bigging up Jamaica. She know before I even get to say, guys, where are you watching from? Right? Every week I tune into this and I get to see people from all over the world. I don't see as many in Jamaica, but it is fun to see some from Jamaica representing or where you are. So give me a shout out. Where are you? Big up your current location where you live. Big up where you're from if you're from somewhere else. Yeah. Today, actually, I had a meeting this morning with someone based in Toronto who is from St. Vincent. And I learned quite a bit about St. Vincent and not necessarily the opportunities there, but and the fact that their volcano is not like St. Lucia's volcano, that you can go into the crater, the Soufriere volcano in St. Lucia. The way you go into it, you can actually drive in it park, but we can actually climb up the side of it and come back down. But no, I get to see James Elmore is here. He is checked in, and we're going to bring him in because we really want to cover this topic about international island collaboration. So I see Nicole is watching from Montreal, Canada. So big up Canada, big up Montreal. You have an amazing reggae festival up there, by the way. Love it. So I'm going to bring in James now, and we should be able to get this show on the road. So, Mr. Ellsmoor.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for making the time. I know you are a very busy person. You have a really good newsletter. And I mean, you sent out what, 2 of them this morning? I think I was reading with some really interesting stories.
Oh, hopefully you didn't get 2 of them. Should have only been one, but we'll think about
I think I'm subscribed on both my company email address and my personal email address. So, all right. So
yeah, we started that newsletter really to share information and stories about sustainable development from islands all over the world. So we have islands obviously in the Caribbean, in Scotland, in Canada, the Pacific, worldwide, and sharing information is that critical aspect.
No, I love that. So give us a little bit of background on this organization, this entity that you founded.
So I originally had a renewable energy background. That was where I started. And I think with renewables particularly, there are these commonalities between islands around the world trying to deal with the same issue. Not being able to have interconnection to neighboring countries or neighboring mainlands, often having quite a small size. And that really creates a opportunity to say, okay, what can Jamaica share with Fiji, share with Iceland? Okay, they're very different places, but the challenge they're dealing with is the same.
Okay, and so how long have you been doing this? Because I've known about, I feel that it's at least 3 or 4 years that I've been seeing things come through LinkedIn onto my feed, but how long has it really been around?
So it's something that has evolved over the last couple of years. Actually, just started with the newsletter. And so the newsletter was my interest that I wanted to share all of this information I was being sent and gathering and kind of package it into a useful way. And now it's evolved into kind of a news platform. We hold webinars, we hold various different events. And we also have our own kind kind of we offer our own services in communications in this area of sustainable development as well. And so particularly our virtual island summit this year, we had over 10,000 people register from islands all over the world. We had speakers ranging from the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, President of Guyana, Prime Minister of Fiji, as well as kind of the people on the ground getting their hands dirty, doing the implementation. And the idea was to be broad. So as well as kind of being global in our focus, we try and involve the private sector, governments, who am I missing? Academics and NGOs, and say, okay, all these different sectors need to collaborate in the field of sustainable development.
I love that. So for those who don't understand what the term sustainable development might encompass, how do you explain that to someone who is just now hearing that term? They don't know what the UN SDGs are. How do you explain sustainable development?
So sustainability is essentially allowing our systems to continue into the future. So how do we, something that is not sustainable is almost a way of defining it is coal. There's only so much coal in the ground. So eventually it's going to run out. And so I don't think most things are not fully sustainable, but trying to have a system that will last into the future, that future generations will be able to depend off, and not just exploiting the resources for the here and now at the expense of future generations. And so sustainable development, as you mentioned, the UN, the United Nations set out 17 goals that all countries in the world are bound to, covering things like sustainable energy. And that's not just the green environmental side. I mean, it's, yes, making the energy source more sustainable, but also making sure all people have access to electricity. So that's why it's sustainable and development, because you're covering not only making the world more environmentally friendly, but also improving the quality of life for the people that live in the world. And I do think that those two things can happen at the same time.
No, so I love hearing you talk about the fact that it has to be inclusive growth when we're talking about sustainable development, and it's not just poverty focused, right? We need people to earn more money, but we also want them to have a better living environments as well. So I like the way you talk about that. So now with the summit that you just had, what would you consider were three of the most popular or most well-received topics or panels that you guys hosted?
Yeah, we had a range of discussions on the political level. It was interesting to see statements, especially as I mentioned, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has just taken the chair of CARICOM as well. So it was interesting to see that on a regional level, and that approach. We had several sessions on sustainable oceans, which I think attracted a lot of interest because if you're on an island, many things are directly connected. I mean, the tourism industry depends on a clean ocean in a lot of places and a healthy ocean. And then we even had a topic on Brexit and the future of the overseas territories. So how does Brexit, obviously I'm from the UK, how does Brexit impact the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, the Falklands? Because they were the people in those places were not able to vote on the referendum, but are very much impacted by it as overseas territories. So that one's obviously quite specific. Others were much broader, and renewable energy was a really popular topic. It's all over the place. When we had 30 sessions covering lots of different topics, the idea is not that everyone attends every session, but to try and kind of offer a breadth of sustainable development. And we're now working on our next event, which is, I guess we haven't officially announced it. So, but I'll tell you now, is for early next year, the Island Finance Forum. And I want to mention that because it's relevant, because all of these problems we're talking about, the problem is always finance. How do you pay for them? And we wanted to have a conversation that perhaps would bring in the finance people who often are not talking with the sustainable development people. They're living in two different worlds, and what we really want to do is bring some of these worlds together to make these bridges and conversations.
No, well, I'm excited for that one. Please keep me posted, and anything we can do to help promote it or participate. I'm sure from a Blue Mohawk Capital standpoint, we would certainly want to help sponsor that one in particular. I think that's going to be great. By then, our impact fund will be up and running as well, and we might have one or two case studies to share. So it's interesting that you bring up the fact that the finance people tend not to be talking to the people focused on sustainable development, even though all the data has now shown that not just the ESG investing, but impact investing is actually good for returns. You don't give up returns to do that kind of investing. Why do you think it is that the finance people still have not really started to talk and interact with the people on the sustainable side?
And that wasn't meant to be a dig at finance people, you know. It was just there's lots of these different sectors that have siloed, and I think it's often the language that people use. You know, sometimes I think we dabble in all these different sectors, and we have enough of an understanding of the different sectors to try and build a bridge and share information. And you know, but a lot of the times, if I attend an event on finance, I have no idea what's going on.
Right.
And I think that I have, you know, I have a surface level understanding at least, but then trying to make that information accessible to the person who is actually trying to build a project or do it is the challenge. And that's not just, you know, another example would be between, say, the government and the private sector. You know, again, two different sets of languages that are used, a different way of thinking and working, and often the problem comes where those two sectors clash, even if they might be working towards the same thing. So I like to say we're building digital bridges, because between islands, but also between sectors.
I love that. So don't worry. It is not a dig at the finance world, and I certainly don't take it personally. But you know, a few weeks ago we had a show that focused on creative industries. So we talked about the exact same problem of language, that creative people tend not to speak the language of the finance people who need to finance the movie or the documentary or the song. So this is very common in that. I think if you talk to a scientist, the science person uses their language and they're trying to explain why you should invest in this drug that might cure some kind of cancer. And the finance person is just lost at the science part. So there's nothing wrong with that. We have to admit that. And that's where a translator can come in, where somebody like you who has a surface level understanding of finance, but understands the potential impact of this on the sustainable side, could at least help to bridge two worlds. I mean, we can beef up your finance chops, though. Don't worry, we'll all work on that. So from a collaboration standpoint, especially I wanted to talk today about international island collaboration. And I love that you brought up Fiji Islands elsewhere, not just the Caribbean. Do you feel that in the Caribbean we tend to be too Caribbean focused and not looking at best practices or examples from other areas, from Malaysia, for example, and trying to bring that here? Or are we actually paying attention and visiting these other countries and trying to bring back stuff and sharing ours?
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being Caribbean focused. I mean, there's plenty happening. You know, you can even think about island collaboration within the Caribbean. I mean, most of there are certain connections that happen on the regional level, but in some sectors there's perhaps not a knowledge of what is happening even in the next island, and so there's plenty there that can be done just to share that information. How are two islands that might be visible from each other be actually approaching things? And you know, in some cases. In some cases, one of the issues I think that the Caribbean has that prevents collaboration is the transport links. I mean, trying to get around the Caribbean, and I don't know to tell you this, it's so difficult. I remember, like, for people outside of the region, they might not kind of realize this, but even the fact that so many flights go through Miami,
right?
A lot of people might not have a visa for the US, and so that kind of cuts off something straight away. There's a challenge there. And I actually think that this virtual world that we were heading into, and now we've been forced into this year, is really going to benefit the Caribbean a lot, because all of a sudden there's all these job opportunities that previously people might have felt like they had to leave the region to go to the US or Canada to do, that they can do from staying in the region. And
Yeah,
so there's been a lot of attention on kind of the Barbados tourism visa. And I think that's a good opportunity. How do you get tourists to stay in the region and stay long
sure.
term?
Right.
But for me, the bigger opportunity is how can residents of the Caribbean take advantages of these opportunities of working for companies that maybe didn't, or start a company. How many amazing founders of tech companies have left the Caribbean to move to California?
Yes.
Why not stay in Kingston, start your tech business? There's not actually that much benefit now of being in
You know,
California,
there. Yeah.
everything moving online. And so I think that trend was happening anyway, but obviously COVID has accelerated it rapidly. And business after we go back to whatever is the new normal is not going to be the same.
It's not going to be the same. I love that you bring that up as a collaboration option, because I keep saying to people that work from home means work from anywhere. So why not be sitting on the beach and have access to that? And I don't think that people in developed countries like the US, the UK, Canada realize that if their job can be done from home in California, in Florida, New York, in Toronto, it can be done in Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, St.
Yeah.
Vincent. So, I'll give a simple example. I have a classmate of mine from high school in Jamaica. Years ago, 2 years ago, we were talking about him possibly investing in Blue Mohawk Capital. And I had to ask him, I was like, so just by the way, what you do for a living? I'm not even sure what is your business. And I said, oh, my company designs templates that get sold on websites in the United States. So they build web templates and they build presentation templates. And then they just sell them. That's all he does. Just design the templates and then sell them. You buy it, download it, use it for a PowerPoint presentation. And it was entirely based in Jamaica. And I thought, wow, even I didn't think about that as an opportunity. It's a digital good. It could be done anywhere in the world, could be sold anywhere in the world. He didn't have to leave Jamaica. And this is going to show us even more opportunities now that when we talk about sustainable development and island collaboration, we don't bring up brain drain enough. But that's exactly what you're talking about. We can reverse the brain drain that has pulled people away from the region and now have work and knowledge come to the region instead and have more people stay. Is that one way of putting it?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was trying to articulate. It's the opportunity for a reverse brain drain. So, yes, there's an opportunity to attract tourists to stay for a few months and spend money locally. But what about the Caribbean residents who perhaps can return, who've emigrated and can return, or the future generations that perhaps won't see that they need to emigrate anymore? And I think that's an exciting change. And that applies, again, coming to a very different context, my country, the UK, we have a lot of smaller island communities, particularly in Scotland, that may have a few hundred people sometimes, others thousands. Traditionally, people from those islands have had to emigrate to go to Edinburgh or London or larger cities to work because that's where the opportunities were. But actually, it's cheaper to live in the islands. It's beautiful. It's a bit cold in Scotland, but everywhere it's cold. It's beautiful. You have bilingual education. You have community spirit. Sure, some people are still going to live in cities because they want that city vibe. But a lot of families, particularly as people get a bit older and they've settled down, why wouldn't you want to live in these beautiful places? And so a different context in Scotland. But again, I think that's a similarity that other regions that maybe previously have been regarded as, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but peripheral. You have the centers like New York and London and California that suck all the money in, and then everywhere else is kind of the periphery. And I don't think that's going to be the same in the future. I think the benefit of this digitalization is going to be a more equal access to opportunities in certain levels.
I love that. So James, I'm wearing a suit and long shirt, so you can't see, but I got goosebumps a while ago twice when you're talking about that, because all that I thought about in my head immediately was the fact that urbanization typically has not been sustainable, and being able to have more rural development where people say, I don't need to leave my very nice area with this clean air, don't have this crazy traffic and transportation. this is actually a great way to deal with urbanization and even reverse it in the way you just talked about. People don't have to leave their area, and we can't look at it anymore. It's not, I mean, you know, in Jamaica in particular, we say it's country, right?
Mhm.
Why would I leave Mandeville to come to Kingston to work when I can stay there, or leave a part of St. Elizabeth, or part of Ghana? We know that Ghana, Belize, especially Suriname. I think that's a great point that ties back into
Yeah.
urbanization. And urbanization itself has contributed to, for example, climate change. And this is one way that we could play
Mhm.
a role. The Caribbean is a small contributor, but it still matters. We have our own role to play as well. So I've
Yeah.
never thought about it that way. On
And
the
the two countries in the region that have the highest immigration rates are Guyana and Haiti. Highest immigration rates in terms of people who get some kind of degree from university. I think in both of those countries, it's over 90%.
whoa,
It's really, really high. And it's much lower in Jamaica. And I believe it's decreasing already in Jamaica. But yeah, so I think that's going to change things. It's exciting. And in terms of how that relates to other islands around the world, I mean, I do think there are opportunities similar. I don't know if you heard the term SIDS, Small Island
yeah,
Developing State, for your listeners
small
who.
island developing state. Yes,
So that could be island countries in Africa, Cape Verde, Mauritius, Asia, like the Maldives, and the Pacific Islands. There are certain differences that all these regions face, but again, there are things that are happening in some of those countries that I think the Caribbean can learn from. But there's a lot that will be happening in the Caribbean that other regions can learn from as
sure.
well.
So it's interesting. I know that a lot of the Caribbean countries have like a twin cities program with a city in the US or a city in Canada. Do you think that the SIDS countries, those small island developing states, should try and do a same sister city kind of program, or is that
Yeah,
something that
that's a fantastic idea. I mean, there is a lot of collaboration at the very high level between SIDS. There's a group called the Alliance of Small Island States at the United Nations. But that's at the United Nations level because they're all in one place in New York, and all the ambassadors know each other and probably go out for drinks together. Well, not in New York right now, but you get what I mean. Um, and so there is this collaboration on the very high international level between small island states. And actually, that's important at the United Nations because they make up around a third of members.
wow,
And the United Nations is one nation, one vote. So St. Kitts has the same vote as China. Jamaica has the same vote as the US. And so having one third of those votes is important. So yeah, I do think that there could be more collaboration between SIDS, between businesses, between local governments, between the average citizens, and that's kind of what we're trying to build with this network. And even actually, some of our platforms, I see those interactions happening. I remember seeing in we ran a Facebook group, nothing complicated.
right,
Uh, Someone from Vanuatu in the South Pacific posted in there with some information about an energy project happening. Then there was a reply from Egg, which is a small island in the north of Scotland, with some information about their project. Then someone in Jamaica chimed in. It's like those kind of interactions. Yeah, it's just a Facebook group, but having a platform where those
wow.
interactions are easy is an opportunity.
So is that something that you're considering doing with Island Innovation itself? I put up the website on the screen so people can go to it. But is that something you think you're going to do yourself, or are you going to facilitate someone doing that?
Well, we facilitate those connections, and I'm a big believer of keeping it simple. Like most people have Facebook, so let's use a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group.
Right.
We have both of those, and then at our events, most of our events are free to attend, and so anyone can join in, and you see the connections there where people, virtually meet each other, exchange emails, LinkedIn, and then continue. So I've seen conversations and connections that have been sparked by things that we facilitated. I'm not going to claim credit for them because
Right.
we weren't really involved directly, but I know that those two people had met through an event that we organized, and that led to further collaboration. So that's kind of the role I see for Island Innovation. We'll make the connections, and then people can go ahead and do what they want with them.
No, well, I still think you're playing a very important role. I've made connections through some of those groups as well, and through attending events. So I highly recommend any viewers watching this that you should check out islandinnovation.co. Look at the events, sign up, visit the groups. I prefer LinkedIn to Facebook, but use whichever one you're comfortable with, and make those connections. You never know. One of the things I would say to people, maybe you'll agree with me, James, or not, is don't focus on going in only when you have an idea that you want to get funding for. Other people need help for their ideas. So if you know how to do digital marketing, for example, or you might actually know how to do what I'm doing, this live stream event, right, or the video, help this person get the word out. You don't have to be somebody who is like, oh, I want to do a solar project. No, just marketing and need to help somebody with a solar project. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. It's a two-way street. You get out what you put in, and sometimes that might not be as obvious. It might take some time, but definitely you kind of, if you can build rapport with people and not just be there to extract anything, you will get a better relationship. And it's interesting to see. I thought about the idea of creating a new platform, but when I've seen people do that, the reality is that people don't actually use it. So we have LinkedIn, we have Facebook. I don't want to make it overly complicated. And it's quite a different group. Our Facebook members are quite different than our LinkedIn members, and people who use those platforms. So, it's interesting to see those differences as well.
No, I love that. So I definitely agree. Don't reinvent the wheel. You can sit on top of somebody else's platform. You have a newsletter already, so you've built up a really good database as well. So if Facebook went kaput tomorrow, you could then send them to the LinkedIn group or to another one. So I like that you're doing that and you're focusing on where you can really add value. So from a topic standpoint, international island collaboration, you brought up collaboration within the Caribbean, and you talked about airlift being one of our biggest issues, but the pandemic obviously now hopefully changing that, where people say, oh, I can do virtual stuff. What else could we do, in your opinion, to increase collaboration within the Caribbean? Is there anything else besides more Zoom calls rather than having to fly?
Yeah, I think it's difficult right now because the goalposts are moving so quickly. I mean, we're all a bit fed up of sitting in front of our computers and that being
yes.
the only kind of contact that we get. So I do think that it's not the end of the conference. People are going to be going back to in-person conferences and events in the future. But I would like to see some of this momentum that's been gained with virtual events to really keep going. So what I mean by that is maybe there'll be, and this is actually something that we're hoping to implement next year, will still be a virtual conference, but there'll be hubs happening in different countries, in islands that are physical get-togethers. Maybe there will be, maybe this is going to be a new standard. I think the new standard is going to be different. Not sure where we want to land with that. But it is, I mean, it is quite a fluffy thing in a way. It's ultimately just opening the book and seeing what happens, opening this connection, seeing what happens. So I think maybe where there's the opportunity within the Caribbean is kind of with, say, young professionals. All the ministers know each other. The Minister of Economy of Jamaica knows the Minister of Economy of Guyana, etc. Right. So they're all connected. They're already probably on WhatsApp to each other, whatever. But you just go a little bit below to the small business person, the young professionals, even well, maybe not so much students because UE is so internet or regional. That's a bit different. But there are certain areas that aren't. So maybe there's an opportunity there. I think businesses, realistically, especially in the small islands, it's difficult to scale when you only have a small market. A lot of businesses, 100,000 people is not a big enough market for that to be successful. And the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, does a good job of facilitating that. And I think I know this is an ongoing thing, but if there could be more at the CARICOM level to increase opportunities for business to happen within the region, that would be good, because young entrepreneurs, if you start a business in the US, you have a market of 300 million people. Start a business in St. Lucia, you have 200,000. So there's the limited opportunity. Again, the virtual space is going to change that, because depending on your business, doesn't matter where you are in the world if you can deliver your service. So
exactly.
that's an opportunity that will be used.
So I love saying that when I started Real Vibes with my brother back in 2002 February, we would always present to university students, mainly in Jamaica. And we were telling them that doing an online business allowed us to be instantly international. So that's what I keep saying to people now. So I see Michelle asking an interesting question. Do you screen the contributors so we're getting legit information? Interesting question.
So anyone can participate in our events. We don't kind of put a barrier there. So just like anything, you have to take everyone as they come and use your own sense. But obviously when we're doing panels, when we're doing sessions, yeah, we're being careful on who we put up on the screen in front of everyone, that we know they're legit. And at our Virtual Island Summit, we had nearly 200 speakers this year.
Ooh.
And that ranged from, as I said, ministers, business people, academics, NGO leaders, activists. And so having all of those different inputs is helpful, because who might seem legitimate to a business person, an activist who is campaigning has a very different perspective. And so there's always a bit of subjectivity to that question.
Okay, well, so I'll invite more people. Any other questions or comments you have, please submit them while James and I are talking. Don't wait for some Q&A session 15 minutes before the end of it. That's not how this works. So, but no, so that's some interesting points that you brought up around that collaboration side beyond the initial one about the air transportation side. One of the projects we want to work on that I feel is unfortunately just not really talked about enough is leveraging technology in terms of video to show people other islands. I think that because of the travel problem, I figured, hey, shoot some video and then tell a story. I've learned so much about whether it's Singapore or Chongqing in China or Shenzhen or parts of India, Mumbai, because I've gone and seen video that is really well done. Right? Somebody puts together a video and says, here's my city, or I'm visiting this city. And I would love to see something along those lines where we visit different places, different towns around the Caribbean, and then showcase, here's what's happening here. Here is a sustainable development project, or here's multiple projects. Talk to an activist, a business person. Do you think, and that's not being done to make money, I'll be honest, we just put it on the internet. Is that something you think that could also help, since we seem to always be on YouTube and on our phones?
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting. I don't think anyone really knows where the tourism industry is heading. Right. I don't think it's the end of the tourism industry. Obviously, it's going to exist. You can't visit Jamaica virtually, right? There's only so much you can do virtually. So whether there'll be fewer, whether it's going to be more expensive to travel internationally, I've heard that argument that because there'll probably be less business travel effectively subsidizes other types of travel. So what will happen to this to travel, I think remains to be seen. I definitely think so with video, and I what I'd love to see in the Caribbean is more attention on the culture. Like for me, as an outsider visiting the Caribbean, the culture and the people is the best part, and so much of the advertisement of the Caribbean shows empty sandy beaches, which are beautiful, and who doesn't want to go to them? But it's like, oh, there's no actual people living there. And I think that is, that's a problem with the type of tourist that wants to come, which is a shame. But I'm wondering if the fact that maybe we'll see tourists making fewer holidays but staying longer when they come, that's a possible trend. Maybe the fact that people only want to spend so long on the beach, they need other things to attract them. There will be a broader angle there. I mean, this is all speculation, because I think anyone who says that they know is without sense.
No, what you're saying makes sense to me, though. I agree. I think that makes sense. If I want beach, I mean, we can find a beach almost anywhere. White sand is white sand for the most part. So I want more than that. So Michelle, I like Michelle. She's like she actually puts Q beside her questions, and she has two more questions. So number one, is this platform categorized according to the industry so access is easily facilitated? She's trying to comprehend the program here in terms of island innovation and what exactly, when she comes to the website, what exactly is she expecting to see or should see?
Yeah, so I think we're in the process of redoing our website. It's a journey like everything. So the website is going to be reorganized shortly. I would say if you're interested in seeing the programming, if you go to islandinnovation.co, which you put up /resources, if you go /resources, there you'll get a full list of all of our different programs that we've run, organized according to topic. Okay, Michelle just said, is there an online menu that outlines all these events?
I just
Exactly.
answered.
So yes, if you go there, you'll see kind of a catalog of all the events that we've done in the past. There's a calendar with our upcoming events. We don't have much upcoming right now. The virtual Island Summit was big, so I'm taking a bit of a breather.
Yes.
But if you sign up to our newsletter on our website, then whenever we send this weekly newsletter, and we include all of our future events coming out there. And so things like this Island Finance Forum that I mentioned that we're planning, that will be announced over that network.
Okay, I love that. So I see ZZ Palmer Lewis is asking, are there benefits for those in the food industry? So she's obviously getting very specific now because I guess she's in that gastro space.
Well, agriculture is hugely important. I would say Jamaica is probably better off than some islands, but some of the smaller islands, 95% of the food is imported. Jamaica grows a lot more than some of the smaller ones. I know Aruba and Curacao, which are very dry, import almost all of their food. And so it's easy to forget, but when we had that scary period in March, when it felt like the world was ending and we didn't know what was happening, everyone was very worried that what would happen to supply chains. Were the supply chains going to collapse? And there's a lot of islands that are only 1 week away from, have 1 week supply of food. So if those supply chains collapse, it's a really scary prospect.
Wow.
And so I think there's a huge element of sustainability. Agriculture and food links in with obviously water supplies, with energy. Many energy projects many agriculture projects are quite energy intensive, and tourism, because often tourism can be a big driver of demand for certain products as well. So all of these things are interconnected. That's how we approach everything. But I think there are implications for the food industry. I mean, the Caribbean has such a rich cuisine and a rich food culture. But then in many cases, if that food is being imported, I think that's a real shame. But the reality is it's cheaper to grow chicken in Georgia or Florida and import it than it is to grow chicken in a lot of the islands. So you're going to import it, most meat. And a lot of the islands, vegetables and things, it's less appropriate. So there are challenges, and food and agriculture is something we definitely are keen to support.
All right, so here's Michelle here. I love this. How is your company financially funded? Are there donations accepted, or is there some type of subscription service to access the material?
Wow. Michelle, we're welcome to. We always accept donations, of course. It's really important for me that our material is free to access, and that means that we have, in any one meeting, we'll see everyone from ministers to high school students taking part. Often, some of the more targeted ones, we do kind of make sure that they're invite only, or we have a certain group. But in general, we try and make it really accessible. We tend to fund the program by having a sponsor. So we've actually found that there's so much free information online that people in general are not really willing to pay, because, I mean, think about how many webinars, how many sessions you get invited to now. It's just a lot. So, and it's also important for us that we want it to be accessible. It's really great that we have high school students, etc., involved. And then additionally, we offer a range of services. So this year, one of the biggest things in demand for us has been virtual event management. That was a new area, but actually running events. I've got a full week-long event that I'm hosting next week for the University of North Carolina, that we're kind of branding, marketing, running, hosting the whole thing. We did another event a few months ago for the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund as well. So we offer kind of services, I would say, the intersection of communications and sustainability. And we have this certain area of expertise.
I love that. So ZZ, you said, my apologies, I should have been more specific. I was thinking more about prepared food, restaurant catered food. So that's interesting that she got hyper specific. And
yeah, I mean, I would say obviously your food industry, your prepared food industry, there's an important conversation to be had over where the food is coming from. So I think what I was saying about agriculture is still relevant. I haven't seen this as much in the Caribbean, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in my country, in the UK, it's really common that restaurants, if they buy local ingredients, really push that as a marketing ploy. And the fact that they're using British meat, British vegetables,
local pepper.
Yeah, whatever. Well, not so much in this country; it's a bit cold. But whatever they can grow locally, and so I think there's a marketing opportunity there for businesses selling food if they're able to source that food locally, because the consumer in general wants local, more sustainable food. That's a common demand, and I think whether it's local people or tourists, you can sell a premium if you're able to make that connection.
Yeah, man, ZZ, thank you for the question. I appreciate that one. That was an interesting one. So I want to follow up on what she was saying. So I do agree with you. I haven't seen this big push about the fact that they're using local ingredients in the Caribbean, right? When I travel, especially if I travel to California, they're big on talking about using the local foods. But we're talking about sustainability, and something we don't tend to talk about a lot in the Caribbean is food waste and then waste management for energy. So what are your thoughts around those opportunities?
Yeah, waste is a huge sector. It is a really big challenge for islands thinking about the waste. How do you get rid of it when you maybe haven't got the space to store it? And again, Jamaica is a different story than Aruba, where you have a lot more space in Jamaica that you can kind of bury it and
dump, as I understand it, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're familiar. In St. Martin, they have a problem every year with the dump, where they have this, it's a small island, and every year there are fires in their dump that kind of fill the whole island with acrid fumes, and it's really dangerous. But it is challenging, and I think the focus should be, before we get to the waste, it should be reducing the amount of packaging and reducing the amount of things that can't be reused, because the reality is, if you have a tin of whatever that's been imported from the US, that tin probably then has to go back to the US to be disposed of in many cases. And so if we can find more sustainable ways of packaging things and again, growing things locally.
Yeah, this is Tarek saying, waste is politics. You know how much money there is in garbage.
Well, I mean, to an extent, Tarek, but at the same time, if you don't have the scale for smaller communities, if you don't have the scale, it can be more expensive to export than you actually get from processing it. So again, it depends a lot on the exact location of how it's managed. There is an important one. I mean, I'm obviously very pro renewables, and that's I think the renewable energy industry has huge potential to reform island regions like the Caribbean, and to there's wider economic benefits. I can go into that in a second, but I wanted to point out the disadvantage of that we're kind of building these renewable energy platforms, renewable energy centers more and more in the Caribbean. But sometimes I don't think there's been enough thought put into what happens in 20 years' time when those systems need replacing. So I don't want that to be used as an argument against renewables. I strongly believe in renewables, but I would like more thought to be put into the end of life. Because I think right now, 20 years just seems too far away to think about. But we don't want all of a sudden to have this issue of what to do with this battery, particularly battery waste, which can be quite toxic waste. Yeah.
Oh, no, great. So, all right. So you said you wanted to go into the renewable energy side a bit more, that you see as an opportunity in the Caribbean.
Some parts of the Caribbean, I think, I forget. I won't say which countries, but I know there are some countries in the Caribbean that up to a third of GDP is spent on importing fuel. I think in Jamaica it's a bit lower. It's more like 10%, but even 10% is huge.
Still massive.
10% of money, and that's money leaving the country. And so that's why I said there's an economic opportunity. If you can keep that money circulating within the country, then that's being spent in other areas as well and benefits the local economy. Caribbean people pay anywhere from 3 to 5 times more per unit of electricity than people in Florida do. I mean, everyone in the Caribbean is familiar with high light bill, and so what that means is, yeah, I think there's an economic argument here as well. Often renewables, we think it's all about climate, it's all about environment, and that's obviously important too. But for the Caribbean to be sustainable and more independent, I think it's also a matter of independence, because there's an economic independence is just as important as political independence. Yeah, renewables can really bring that opportunity to for independence, definitely.
So I love that it tied back to the economic side. I think too many people focus on renewables from the tree hugger standpoint, and not also making that exact argument that, hey, you're going to be saving hard currency, you're going to have a multiplier effect with that money within your own, your society, and then of course you have more independence. So you're not depending on geopolitical stability between Saudi Arabia and the United States and getting access to oil. So I love that you do that. Let me see. Michelle is saying, I think the islands need to establish more manufacturing facilities where recycling can be a core processing function. We are quite innovative, no need to outsource. So I will give my thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts on that, James. Now, Michelle, what I would say is that, yes, we need to establish more manufacturing facilities, but James just hit the nail on the head. Electricity is 3 times as expensive. So if you look at manufacturing costs in Jamaica versus manufacturing costs in Trinidad, well, you would go and establish it in Trinidad then, because they have a much lower cost of electricity. So,
well, for now they do. It's not going to last very long, but for now.
Yeah, for now, right? That's true. And you know, it's going to move to Guyana, right? Because Guyana found new oil. So, but I think, the story I try to tell everybody when we talk about, we should do more manufacturing in Jamaica in particular. And I say, all right, well, we dig up red dirt, bauxite, which is not sustainable either. That's as bad as coal. It's finite, and it actually removes soil. We dig up red dirt, we turn it into alumina, we put it on a barge, and then we export that, which then gets refined, and we have to import the aluminum can with the Coca-Cola in there. So the finished product, which makes the most money, is what we actually pay for. Why has there never been a smelter in Jamaica? Well, the answer is electricity is too expensive for us to build a smelter there. So we have to deal with the energy supply problem that you just brought up, the cost. And I live in Florida, so we have the house in Jamaica, have the house in Florida. Here in Florida, I pay about 11 cents per kilowatt hour at the most expensive at peak, right? We can be down to as low as 9 cents. And in Jamaica, we're paying 32, 33 cents per kilowatt hour. And I can see the difference. It's insane. So, of course, here's Michelle asking, is solar power an alternative method as an energy supply? So come, let's see you put on your solar power hat now, James.
I don't think right now solar power is going to provide 100% of the electricity in the Caribbean anytime soon. But I think the argument is that we can reduce quite rapidly the percentage of diesel imports that is used to generate fuel. And it's also that when you don't have scale, you don't have the millions and millions of people that perhaps the US has. It's also difficult. You can't build a nuclear power plant. Nuclear is cheap, but there's no way you're going to build a nuclear power plant in Jamaica. It's not enough. It will be way too expensive for the number of people. So I think that solar is a good opportunity as part of it. Maybe there's wind in some of the islands. There's also geothermal.
Yes.
People talk about natural gas as well, which is less polluting than petroleum, but is by no means a green renewable fuel. Right. But that's a very controversial one to get into natural gas.
What about like biodiesel? Since we have all this food waste, agricultural waste, do you think that might be, looking at those alternative fuels might be an opportunity where we should? Well, this is my argument. We should be leading the R&D on that kind of stuff, biodiesel, biofuels in the Caribbean, because it is to our advantage. That's my personal opinion.
No, I agree. And I think the electricity, like electric vehicles as well. Sorry, that just reminded me of electric vehicles. I'll come on to that in a second. Electric vehicles are a big opportunity. In terms of biodiesel, it's interesting. Some of the countries, the country that's most advanced with this is Brazil because of their sugar industry. The sugar industry in the Caribbean is not that prominent anymore. And so, but Brazil, because of the sugar, they really push the use of ethanol. Again, it's this matter of trying to be competitive, and I think everything comes down to energy. I don't know. Actually, it's interesting. I haven't heard that much about biodiesel in the Caribbean. One place I know that uses a lot is Mauritius. So thinking about another island where Mauritius still has a stronger sugar industry, and they do a lot there with biofuels as well. So that would be an interesting one to compare, but it's not an area I know much about. Can I talk about electric vehicles though?
So I'm going to make you pause, and we're going to end up talking about electric vehicles, including Barbados signing to buy electric buses. But we're going to have a question from Michelle, and I'll bring it up after that. And I was going to say that Michelle talked about the harnessing the sun, which is our blessing. And the one thing I want to point out to Michelle, and I tell everybody, solar is only part of your energy mix because the sun doesn't shine for the whole day. So if you don't have storage, you're going to have a problem. And the sun doesn't shine at the same intensity every day, right? So when you have cloud cover, then production dips. But if I'm a manufacturer, I can't afford to have electricity dip. So solar by itself is not enough at all. It just can't work. And then you brought up wind, which the wind can stop blowing. So we have that. Geothermal is at least more more concerned. And then we have hydropower, right? Jamaica has one hydropower plant, but most islands don't actually have rivers. Jamaica has a lot of rivers, but most islands don't have rivers to create that.
Guyana has hydro too. Guyana and Suriname, I think, but obviously they're very different. Like Jamaica, they've got a lot more space and they've got huge rivers. I was going to say, though, this energy storage is changing rapidly. So who knows what will be in 10 years for that? Because there's a large project now being installed in St. Kitts with the utility there for a large solar plant with energy storage. And so, in theory, if you could have enough solar to generate electricity in the day, you could store that electricity for when the clouds come or to use at night as well. So we'll see what happens with the storage industry.
No, that's great. So Tarek is saying solar and wind is easier to get into than waste because God controls. He's funny. So electric vehicles now. We're going to start wrapping up electric vehicles. I love that you brought that one up.
So I think electric vehicles are currently a missed opportunity. The island in the Caribbean that is by far and away ahead of the others is Barbados, not just for the electric buses that the government's bought. There's also a company there. There's a Bayesian lady, Jo Edgehill, who has really advanced the cause there. Joe's done a fantastic job.
Personally, big shout out to Jill. I remember Marla Dukaran, who I know really well. Marla. Marla got her car through Jill. Jill has really promoted EVs.
Joe
has. Yeah, they've really promoted EVs. I mean, hats off to them.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some interesting things happening there where they're reusing old electric vehicle batteries and finding ways to. So again, this is not just recycling them, but maybe you can only use them for the first 5 years. I don't know if that's true. The first few years in electric vehicle, but that doesn't mean that they're useless. So there's finding another purpose where they're maybe less strong now, but you can still do other things with them. And so they've been experimenting with that. Barbados has some of the most expensive fuel in the world. So it's much more, very pushed in Barbados to go electric because of the price differential. It's also flat, relatively. So, I wouldn't want to go into the Blue Mountains in an electric vehicle necessarily. But in Barbados, you're probably, okay on the whole. And so, no, I think that electric vehicles in the Caribbean will be a good option. We need to see more action from governments kind of providing incentives there. And I think that there are some barriers, policy and finance that need to be overcome. The reality is they cost more upfront. But over the next 10 years, you're going to save that money. But people always, and this is the same worldwide, they see the upfront costs and they go with what they can afford now as opposed to thinking about the long term.
Most people don't buy cars thinking of the actual full cost of operating the car. They just focus on the sticker price, not the operating cost. So if you factor in insurance, service, and maintenance and gas, you'd quickly realize, the EV is cheaper. So I know Jamaica is rolling out charging stations. They already have charging stations at some locations in Kingston. And the power company, JPS of all people, are the ones partnered to roll out about 17 charging stations across the island. Are there other countries other than Barbados that you know of in the region doing similar charging station plans for cars?
Well, I should imagine JPS would be very happy if all Jamaicans started buying electric vehicles. It'd be good for them, their business, wouldn't it? So I don't think it's
That's true.
yeah, I don't think it's completely out of the goodness of their heart. They've got an incentive there. No, I'm not sure. Beyond that, I've heard of other projects in the Eastern Caribbean and some of the other islands. There've been projects and there've been governments that have reduced tariffs. So they've made the tariff less on electric vehicles to encourage people to buy them. And there's been some islands in the UK and Scotland, actually, in Orkney, where they've got the highest use of electric vehicles in the country. Again, because you actually can't drive that very far if you live there. So electric vehicles make sense. If you're going to be driving hundreds of miles each day, then probably don't get an electric vehicle yet. But most people are not. Even if you live in Kingston, you're probably just driving to work every day, driving to the supermarket, whatever. You don't need the range issue is not that much of an issue.
Right. So you don't have range anxiety on a small island. Makes sense. So Michelle is asking, what about hurricanes that could interfere with electric outages, power grid issues, which would affect power and electric vehicles? So that's interesting. Here in Florida, we have hurricanes, and we've seen the way they've promoted electric vehicles is that, hey, if you have a hurricane and your power is out, you can actually power your house from the electric car, right? The car can actually be a provider of electricity back into the grid, into your house. So that's what we've seen here, Michelle. James, over to you.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a fair enough point. But if you have solar panels, then obviously, provided the solar panels survive the hurricane. But if your roof survives the hurricane, if your solar panels are installed properly, they will too. So I mean, you can only prepare so much, right? There are some things, nothing can prepare for.
You
but
sound
in general,
like a real Caribbean person when you say that if your roof survives the hurricane, then...
Well, what I'm meaning to say is that, like, in general, the solar panels are built to withstand hurricanes.
Yeah.
But if you've got solar panels, you can obviously. We saw Puerto Rico as a really good example, where there were people for over a year without power in some cases. Most of the island for months without power, and so the people who had a small battery and solar system were able to keep going, and a lot of others weren't. And so you could think about the same thing with electric vehicles. If there's a hurricane, actually you might have your supply of fuel interrupted. And so if you're able to prepare for that, then I think electric vehicles provide a good option. I think a lot of if renewables are done right, they could and they should make the Caribbean more resilient to they give more resilience. I'm laughing at Tarek's comments.
I know. I had to put it up.
More resilient to future hurricanes. There was a really good report called Solar Under Storm, put out by the Rocky Mountain Institute, that went into the real engineering detail about what happens with solar and hurricanes. If you're interested, we'd encourage you to check that out.
I will have to go and check that one out because I'm very interested. We lost our roof in 1988 in Gilbert, so definitely interested in that. Let's see. We're going to wrap up now. Adriana is saying Tesla superchargers were still up and running during the last hurricane. So I like that one.
Good to know.
I didn't know that either, so I will have to check that out. That's interesting. Well, no, James, we're going to wrap up. We're on the close now for the hour. I want to say thank you so much. This was really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people are going to learn a lot from this. It's rare that I do an interview and I get goosebumps when somebody says something, but it just really hit me about that urbanization versus rural development. And I was glad that came into that sustainable discussion. So everyone, is www.islandinnovation.co. Please check it out. You're going to have your Island Finance Summit next year. We don't know when it's yet, but we're putting that one out there so we can learn to speak the language of finance.
Keep you posted on that one.
Keep you posted, guys. So, no, James, thank you very much for participating today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, man. All right. Oops. So there you have it, guys. That was Island Forward today. We focused on talking with James Ellsmoor from Island Innovation about international island collaboration. I got to learn. I hope that you got to learn as well. Please check out his website. Check out the summits. And let's talk a bit more about sustainable development and how the various islands in the Caribbean and then the various islands around the world they can talk as much. So thank you for all the questions, especially Michelle. Thanks for the shout out. And I have to say, Tarek, thanks for the jokes, man. So thank you, everyone. See you next week. We'll continue this Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Looking forward to many more. See you later.